We meet Stolas at a time in his life when he's been awakened to something that's been wrong for him for a long time. I think jelly sandwiches was the last thing I said. And it was like, I don't know, a minute and a half worth of just raunchy rant. There was silence on the other end, and I was like, oh no, I think I just got fired.
You're watching convention coverage.
So let's get started for this. Bryce, it has been wonderful to have you here and experiencing this fandom, which I know for you, this is your first major voice acting role, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Boss?
Yeah.
However, before that, Viv picked you up because Viv was really looking for somebody who can nail Stolas' songs. Viv is a huge Broadway fan and a huge musical theater fan. So as some of you might know, we had a different voice initially for the pilot and really needed somebody to come in who can nail these beautiful musical numbers. So I would love to hear from you what that audition process was like, how you first heard about the show, and how you felt when you first received the script. What were your expectations?
That's a great question. And thank you for being here, Morgana, and all of you for coming to chat. It's a great question about how this came to be. I'm mostly a Broadway theater performer, and I've been living and performing in New York since about 2008. And I got a DM during the early days of the and it was from, somebody named VivziePop. And I thought, I don't know who this is. What's this? And she wrote to me directly and said, there's this audition I have for you, and it's for an animated show, and I based the character on, or the voice of the character, I want, something halfway between King George in Hamilton and Monty Navarro in A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, which is a part that I originated. So I said, in my head, I thought, well, at least I know I have about 50% of that, and I'd love to play King George someday. So, I'd love to audition. And it came in at a time that, live theater was shut down, and I just become a dad for the second time, and so I was thinking about what work I could do, and I've always wanted to do voiceover, and always wanted to get into animation as well. So it was a great opportunity, and so what did I do? She sent the script, I think, to my agents, and then I did, like I always do with any audition, I made a tape, and just did my first impression of the character from reading the script, and I think she may have sent a picture as well, like a draft of the image of Stolas. And I don't know, when you're a creative person, you just kind of take what you have in front of you and then filter it through your own instrument and try and turn that into something. And so I just started, I can't remember what the lines were, but they were probably lines from the first episode that he's in. They might have even been lines from Lululand or something, because those were already written. And I just put them down in my best Stolas, and thankfully she liked it, and next thing we knew, we were recording all of season 1. And because it was, I recorded them in a booth in my friend's garage, my friend who does a lot of audiobooks. He's got a professional booth, and I went to his garage, and we recorded all of season 1 with Richard and Viv on Zoom. And I honestly, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I was hopeful that I'm always hopeful whatever I do is going to be a success and be meaningful to people, but I certainly didn't know, and I think I always say it's better that I didn't know the sort of magnitude of what Vivzie had created. Of course, I know now, and I love seeing all the fans at SacAnime and everywhere we go, and seeing how much the show is and Stolas has started to mean to people. So it's been a great surprise, and the fact that I get to sing in the show is just so amazing to me, because I never would have thought that there would be a place for musical theater, like a voice of musical theater sort of in this world. And that's the crossover that Vivzie's created, and I'm certainly grateful for.
Well, that's something we've talked a lot about as a cast, is that for our audience, our target audience for the show, our show is so grounded in musical theater, in Broadway. So much of our cast are Broadway performers. But most of our audience, I would say, probably has never been to a Broadway show. Show of hands in the audience, how many people here have seen a Broadway show? Oh, so a lot of you, actually. Well, me. Well, not including you guys, obviously, but I know for a lot of people, this is kind of their first introduction into a musical. You mentioned that Viv reached out to you directly via DM. Do you know if there was a specific performance of yours that she knew you from?
I think she had seen A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, which was sometime between 2014 and 2016. We won the Tony for Best Musical in 2014, and myself and two of my castmates performed on the Tony Awards, and I think either she saw that performance or came and saw the show live, maybe both. And so I think that's why she thought, oh, there's a guy that could do a British accent. You know, Monty Navarro is a British underdog who is learns at the beginning of the show that he is actually part of is a descendant of a high-class family, and he learns that he's only nine family members away from the highest, title. And it's a comedy where he then decides to kill all of his relatives to become the Earl, and by so doing, win the love of his life. So that was a lot of fun and a huge life, a turning point in my life to do that show. And so I think Vivzie saw that, and just another example of how that show has sort of shaped a lot of my creative future.
And you've had a lot of variety in your career on stage. Right now, you're performing as the dentist in Little Shop of Horrors, correct?
Yes.
Which, by the way, if anyone could get out to New York for that, I'm seeing that in March, and I cannot wait. But what led you to getting into this field? Did you always love musicals? Was there one specific moment you remember that sparked your interest in pursuing this?
Yeah, I've talked about this story before, so forgive me if you've heard it before, but when I was in first grade, my parents were called into a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher sat them down. I wasn't there. And the teacher sat them down and said, I'd like you to see if you can find Bryce an outlet for his reckless creativity. And
reckless creativity.
Reckless creativity. Please find him a stage other than my classroom. And so this was in first grade, and my parents started, oh, okay. And they took me over to the local community theater where they were putting on a production of The Music Man. And I was, like many theater kids, I was one of the kids in The Music Man. And I just remember sitting backstage and watching the lead performers sing the songs, and just sort of being like, oh my gosh, this is where I belong, is amongst these type of creative folks. And so that initially sparked my interest, and then my parents got me into youth theater, and I just did it as a kid growing up for fun. And it's where I found community and belonging, and obviously creative enterprise. And I started to sing to be a part of that, and that just continued throughout my life as something, we all have different ways of expressing our sort of innermost feelings that we can't always put into words. Some people draw, some people sing, some people sit down at the piano and play. Some people, do all sorts of things. Some people cosplay, some people write stories. There's just many different ways in which humans access that innermost, cave of hopes and dreams. And singing was that for me growing up, and continues to be in a sort of way. And also, I think, based on that parent-teacher conference, I just like to make my friends in class laugh, And so now the fact that I get to do that 8 nights a week, try and make an audience laugh as the dentist in Little Shop of Horrors. It's a lot of fun. You're gonna come see it?
Oh, I'm dying too.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I have actually never been to a proper Broadway performance before, so Little Shop might be my first one ever.
Oh, it's gonna be good.
There's a big difference in sort of the way we record these sessions being an isolated performance in a vocal booth, oftentimes performing for the laughter of Richard and Viv being on stage.
Yeah.
Had you had any experience doing that sort of performance before? And what was it like in your first voiceover session in the studio? How do you feel about the performance of being on stage versus recording for the show?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's sort of like, what's the difference between performing live and performing in the booth? And how do you make that transition feel natural? I think you're right. When I first came into the recording booth, I sort of didn't know, like, this is what I'm used to. I'm used to an audience and a sort of like instant feedback mechanism that just I've built up over time, that sort of knowledge of how can they follow what I'm saying? Are they liking what I'm doing? I can sort of learn to adjust in real time. And I'm still that kid from first grade who's just trying to make you guys laugh. So when you're in the booth, there's nobody to laugh back at you because, it's got to be quiet in the booth, right? So that was initially difficult because I didn't have my usual feedback tools. But then I just kind of remind myself that I have that internal audience, and if I'm playing for them and ultimately trying to make myself laugh or myself cry or myself feel something, that usually that in my experience, like, that usually translates, and at least it's a place to start. So, and yes, I would be waiting to hear Richard's laughter, at the end of a take to see if he and Viv were into it, and then I would adjust based on what they were doing. But it is different. It's very different when you don't have a sort of like, there's an energy that comes from doing something live, because I can see you guys, like, you guys are nodding over there and I'm nodding back at you. And, even whoever's here on the stream, like, I know they're there. And when you're in the booth, it's just a little bit, it's a little bit more like this. There's no one there. It's everyone's in here, in your cans, as it were. So, it's a different experience, but I've enjoyed the transition and I enjoy the challenge. Anytime you do something for a long time, you seek a new challenge to sort of push you towards growth and push you towards surprising yourself.
Wonderful. And one more personal question before we get into the fan Q&A. I know it's hard to pick a favorite, but do you have one musical that you absolutely love, and why does that make it to the top of your list?
Well, lately Hamilton is the best thing that I've seen since I've been in New York. I saw it downtown before it moved to Broadway, and I'll never forget sitting there and hearing, Lin-Manuel sing, like, now I got to get the lyrics right. History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world, in the greatest city in the world. I was there in the city he was singing about, downtown, near the place where the characters were singing that same lyrics, but, hundreds of years prior to that. But I was watching it performed by actors from my time portraying those characters, but also predominantly a cast of color performing those characters. My brain chemistry just spiked. It was such a thrilling moment that, the more you are in a business of theater, like you have fewer and fewer of these moments where something surprises you or shocks you or amazes you. And that was that moment for me where I just went, man, this is going to be so huge for everybody. And it sure has been. So, oops, I said has been. Maybe it's a sign.
I did not give the warning to the crowd that we throttle anyone mentioning Has Been Hotel at this stage, but it does come out soon.
I guess, yes. I guess I'm the first to be throttled.
I'll see you after the panel.
Yeah, so that's my answer as of late is Hamilton. I have a soft spot in my heart for Music Man, and some golden age musicals. Of course, when you look at them now, there's a lot of problems with them. So that's why I'm excited for new things. I like anything that's come out that's new, that's from a new voice, from a new perspective. We need more of that, and I think Hamilton and Lynn have really opened the door to a lot of newer voices on Broadway, which is really exciting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to bring it over to the audience now.
How does Stolas keep so calm, cool, and collected even when he's going through all of this hatred with his wife and Blitz? But how can he stay so cool, calm, and collected?
I think there's something obviously volatile in Stolas, like there is in all of us, but there's also something, Stolas has been around for a long time, so he's seen a lot. And I think the more and more time that we spend on this little place called Earth, the more you get used to the ups and downs of life. And as you put it, the many different things that make you other than calm and collective and cool. So I think there are times when he's able to remain calm and say things I think he's grounded by his relationship to his daughter. When he sings, everything will be okay. I think he really means that. Because he knows that on the grand scheme of things, everything will be okay. Not every little thing is always going to be okay, but everything, when you look at it together, will be okay. And so I think that's a lesson that he's trying to pass on to his daughter. And so he's certainly grounded by her and by his love. The unconditional love that a parent feels is a very grounding force. There's no question about that. For the parents in the room, they know what I mean. There's hardship that comes with being a parent, but there's no question about the love that we feel. And so that's one way. And gosh, what else? I think there's, we meet Stolas at a time in his life when he's been awakened to something that's been wrong for him for a long time, which is this marriage, and that's a really defining characteristic of his journey is that he starts with a problem. In the series, he starts with a big problem. And Blitz is kind of this door to another side of himself that he's been denying or not been allowed to let out or even be. So I think that while everything with Blitz is tumultuous, I think it's incredibly meaningful because all this time, and he's never been allowed to be his true self. And so I know myself and others find a lot of meaning in that. And so I think he's grounded by truth, which he's discovered more and more of, and he's grounded by the love of his child, which is unquestionable.
Thank you so much.
So welcome. Thank you.
Have you ever had any moments where either you couldn't say something without laughing, or you were just like, maybe I shouldn't say this?
Yeah, we say things in the booth, don't we, that are like, ooh, gosh, let's not keep that.
Which you can imagine with the dialogue that we have. When we say something in the booth and we're like, this might be a bit too much.
Yeah, I remember the first time, that first episode with Stolas where he's on the phone and he's saying all the naughty words. Yeah. So you may have heard this story before if you've listened to panels of ours or been on live streams, but when I recorded that, it was one of my first sessions with Richard and Viv, and they had just said, hey, here's the thing, it's a long phone call, and you're sort of inviting him for, sexual escapades, and just we're gonna bleep it all out, so just like improv it, and we'll choose what to bleep out. And so I was like, okay.
Wait, did you improv that?
Yes. So it's all
that this all actually came legitimately from Bryce's brain.
Yeah. So I forget how it starts, but I won't repeat it, but see, there's your answer. I was like, yeah, there are certain things in certain contexts that I won't repeat. You can see it on the internet. But I remember doing it, and no one told me how long to do it for, so I just kept going, and I was like off on this like improv of like what we're gonna do together and all this stuff, and and then we'll have jelly sandwiches. And I remember I finally stopped. Like I think jelly sandwiches was the last thing I said, and it was like I don't know, a minute and a half worth of just this raunchy rant. And there was silence on the other end, and I was like, oh no, I think I just got fired. And then they clicked in so I could actually hear them, and it's because they were just laughing and sort of like.
That's the great thing. We don't exactly know how we did because we hear them muted. Like they're muted on the other side, so it's just us. But then Richard will press the unmute button, and we'll hear his like very just loud Richard laugh.
Yeah.
Like, okay, nailed it. Perfect.
You guys
Yeah.
laughing
that.
at you maniacally?
Yeah, exactly. And I think they were like, whoa, we didn't know you were going to go there. But at the same time, like to connect to some things I've said before, like that is, that's failure, right? Those are the butterflies. Those are the like, well, I'm just going to go for this. And what do you know? Like, how would I have gotten to something like jelly sandwiches if I had planned it out? I wouldn't have. And if I was afraid of sounding like an idiot or failing or making a fool of myself or saying something wrong, I never would have gotten there. And it's the hardest thing to do is to just, another expression I love to use is go before you know. Go before you know. Sometimes you just have to like go and build the plane as you're flying it, you know, you got to make it up. And those things, sometimes if you're playing at what I call the speed of fun, if you're playing at the speed of fun, which is faster than your worry and louder than your critic, that you can find something like jelly sandwiches that makes it into the show and, you know, people love. I think if I had been so cautious and careful with it, it might not have been as fun for me or for anyone else. So yeah, that's my answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
What do you do to challenge yourself and grow every day?
You know, one thing I like to talk about with students and with aspirants, if that's a word, aspiring creatives, is the butterflies. You know that feeling you get in your stomach? Some people call it butterflies in your tummy, or it's your nerves, and it's like I believe that it's a sort of a primal alarm system that we all have that says, run, you are in danger. You are in danger of being kicked out of the tribe because you might be about to do something foolish or embarrassing in which you will be ridiculed and no longer allowed to be in the tribe, and therefore you will not survive. You know, it's a primal alarm system that we're all equipped with in different ways. And so anytime I feel those butterflies come up, I try to let them lead me a little bit, because I believe that one of my favorite acting teachers said to me and to the class I was in that fear is just excitement without breath. Fear is just excitement without breath. So when I meet you at the table and you say like, sorry, I'm really nervous right now, I always say it's totally natural. It's totally cool. Take some deep breaths, and I think you might just realize that you're not scared, you're just excited. They feel really similar. And sometimes the alarm system is going off and it feels like fear, but it's actually just excitement if you breathe into it a little bit. And so I try to use that to challenge myself. I go, oh, what do I want to work on next? And lately it's been a solo show. I want to build a solo show that's, you know, something meaningful to me and that's generated from me and that I perform, and that's really scary. That's like, there's like a lot of butterflies connected to that. And every time I go back to it, those butterflies start raging and telling me I should stop and quit and don't do this. You're going to embarrass yourself and everyone's going to find out you're an imposter and a fraud and you'll be kicked out of the tribe. And so I've learned to kind of ignore those feelings and tell myself, nah, this means I'm actually really excited about this, and it's a place where I can grow. So another thing is a great thing to talk about is growth. Like there's no growth that happens without failure. You know, we have a real issue with failure in our culture and in our lives. I can think we see it as something to avoid, and I try to encourage people in the creative arts to really court failure, because it's where you grow. You're not going to grow if you don't fail first. So court it, seek it. You know, don't be okay with it. As performers, we don't get about 89% of the jobs that are that we're up for. We don't have probably more than that. We probably fail at 95% of the auditions we take, and then 5% of them we make a career out of. So I've actually failed at getting more jobs than I've gotten, and when you see it that way, you go, right. I remember being in rehearsal once for a show, and I'd had this conversation with a friend of mine in the cast, and we were kind of playing this little experiment to see of the ideas we came up with for the show, for the performance, how many of them were good ideas and how many of them were bad. And so we kept a little tally as we went along. And at the end, we looked to see how many of our ideas actually made it into the show compared to how many we had. And it was like 1 in 12. And so I was like, great, this is a great thing to think about in the room, in the rehearsal room, or in the booth. I know that if I do 12 takes, that one of those will be the one that goes. But I've got to get to that 12 in order to get the one. Do you know what I mean? So I've got to just keep making. I've got to keep inventing and keep doing it differently and keep failing and failing better and failing more. It's like the more failure gets you to the success. It's like if you fail once and then quit, then you're missing the trajectory. It takes lots of failure to get where you think you want to go or where you're ultimately going to end up.
Gotcha. So it's like falling forward.
Falling forward, failing, fail more, fail better. You've heard those expressions before. And following the butterflies, I would say, like let them lead you a little bit. Obviously, don't do anything stupid, but the butterflies are there for a reason. But I think if you listen to them and question them, interrogate them a little bit and say, all right, well, what's really scary about doing this? And why am I scared of that? And is it really actually scary because it could hurt me or hurt someone, or is it scary because it's just natural to be scared of getting up in front of a room full of people and talking to them? I feel nervous right now, but I'm used to it because I do it for a living. And so I just take a breath and let it all out, and then I find what I want to say next and keep moving.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Bryce.
What advice do you have for basically young, what advice do you have for people who are just trying to make it right now?
Hopefully it won't sound like I'm repeating myself, but I repeat this one a lot. And these are 2 words that I think I try and keep with me at all times, and I would encourage you to keep them with you at all times as well. They both start with P, which is also the first letter of my last name. Okay. They are patience and persistence. And those 2 things, when employed together, are really powerful. Because if you get impatient, I think you lose track of the trajectory of doing anything of meaning. It takes a while to do anything meaningful in your life. It's going to take a while. Right. So you got to have patience. And you got to have patience for those people who are saying, no. You just have patience with them. And then mix in with that a healthy dose of persistence, which is self-generated, by the way. That's got to come from you. You just keep knocking on the door and saying, can I try? Can I try? Can I try? Can I try? And eventually someone's going to let you try, as long as you're patient. Because if you get impatient and say, why aren't you letting me try? Why aren't you letting me try? They're going to be like, okay, nope, no, not for me. Right? So it's a finding a balance of those 2 things.
Right.
And then I would say you have to be hungry to just keep learning and just learn from anyone, anywhere, at any time. And anyone who thinks they're done learning about doing this or anything like this, they're just wrong, or they're missing out on more. We're always learning from each other in our field, and learning from people younger than us too. I think there's a sense when you're young that you only can learn from somebody who's been doing it forever. But I actually look to the young people in my cast, and they teach me things every day too, just by observing them. So patience and persistence, and staying open and available to learning from any vantage point. Because even if you're not on stage, you can learn from backstage, and you can watch. You can watch from the house. You can watch from, the catwalk if you're working the lights, or you can watch from the soundboard if you're running the sound. Like there's always a place you can learn from, and being in the room is learning, you know.
Right.
So and often, like when you're first starting out, you have to offer yourself, you have to volunteer your time, and that's a sacrifice to say like, hey, I'll come and do something for free just so I can be in the room and learn from, I'll keep quiet and I'll learn from just being in the room, you know, like auditing a class in university. You can do that with a theater production, you know, go to the director and say, hey, can I shadow you and just sit around and learn from you? You know, that's a version of persistence, of patient persistence. It's, I don't want to direct the thing. I just want to sit and be your shadow and learn from you for free, and I don't cost anything, and I'll bring you your coffee. You know, there's like people turn their nose down at those sort of opportunities, but they're really, that's how you learn. You get in the room and you learn, and you get it, and you get your education for free because you're just along for the ride, and suddenly you know stuff, you know, and I know things now. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you so much.
What advice would you have for someone struggling to choose which passion to turn into a career? I feel like as artistic people, there's like a lot of different directions you can go, and people are always telling me as like a young college student, like, no, you can't do art, you have to make money, you idiot. So like, how do you like pick one thing and feel confident, I guess, that like I feel like I could support myself on this, or
Yeah,
this could be
it's a great question. Like, how do you know? Well, you don't. You just have to go before you know. And I think when you're young, especially when you're in school, like my philosophy is do it all. Do as many things as you're passionate about and have time for and can caffeinate yourself for, you know? Because once you get out of that context, things do get a little more real, and like you have to find a way to support yourself, and like those things will make themselves clear to you, and you know, life will just sort of show you what is possible. And I think if you remain in that space of like anything is possible as long as you can, and build up those passions either together or separately, that you know, the way that opportunities present themselves will kind of lead you to like, okay, in this chapter, I'm going to focus on this passion because somebody's offered me a job in that area. And you know, it's not called show fun or show everybody gets a chance or show fair. It's called show business, and like it is a business, but you're not there yet, and you don't have to be. You shouldn't be. Like you should be allowed to do what you want and what fills you with something meaningful, and build up that passion over time. And at the same time, like whoever's telling you that, in my opinion, they're half right, which is like you have to make a job and support yourself. That's right, but I don't see how that excludes you from doing something like art that you're passionate about. A lot of people do both until they can find the bridge to make them connect or hop over and make a living doing their passion project. So my advice for younger people is to stay passionate and do the things you love while also collecting the skills as a young adult, you know, to make your way in the world. And, you know, I always tell people who come up and want to be, you know, musical theater actors, they say, where should I go to college? And I say, I don't care where you go to college, just get a good education, because it's a fallacy to think that anyone who's doing this like me for a living, I'm in my 40s, and like I moved to New York and I had 3 part-time jobs, you know, like you have to be able to survive long enough to be patient and persistent, right? You can't do it overnight and be like, well, I ran out of funds, I have to leave. You know, like you have to have a full life plan, and that takes time, and you know, flies in the face of what I've said artistically, which is go before you know. Sometimes you just have to go there and figure it out. Like that's half the gig too, is you just go and, you know, you got to find rent, so you get a job to find rent, and then on your time off, you're working on your passion project and letting people know you're doing it, and suddenly someone's like, hey, you know that thing you do really well? You told me about 10 years ago, do you still do that? I do actually, I've gotten a lot better at it. Oh my gosh, would you like to try it out for money? And you're like, yeah, I would. VivziePop, I would love to do your show. I've always wanted to do voiceover. I've auditioned for years to do voiceover, and I've never booked anything, but now here's somebody writing to me saying, would you like to be on my show? I love what you do. I'm going, Yeah, I would. So does that make sense? Like I've
Yeah.
been sort of patient and persistent, and here we are. I'm talking to you about a show that I'm a voice actor on. So
I think Bryce is a perfect example of just, you never know where your passions are going to lead you.
Yeah.
I'm sure 5 years ago, did you know that you were going to be addressing an audience full of people dressed as anime characters?
hell
Are
no.
in love with your owl?
Hell to the no. I mean, where's my Stolas at? There's a Stolas right there. I never thought that there would be a cosplay of a character that I voice. So yeah, you never know. And I think you should be patient with yourself and also patient with those people who tell you no, because they're just trying to help you. They're just trying to protect you. And
Parents say a lot of things.
parents do. And from a parental perspective, I understand it. You know, they want to protect you and they want you to be, they want everything to be okay. You know, they want to take care of you, and that's cool too, because you're going to need that as well. So it's both. It's always both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
So
much.
welcome.
And I think that is a perfect place to end it today. Everyone, thank you so much for coming out. We're